We're back, and it's time to break down the biggest narrative shifts for every single fighter that fought this past weekend at UFC Abu Dhabi. We're going to be talking about the narrative from before the fight and if anything's changed for every single fighter. And we'll also be getting into who I think every single fighter should fight next. There are some fighters that didn't have a narrative change, which is usually not a good thing. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're using the same background, but let's get into it. Again, we're going to go through some of these very quickly because, again, there wasn't a big narrative shift, but we're going to start with the first fight. I believe in Denis Tiuliulin. Denis Tiuliulin has a 11-10 record, which is just insane. No matter what happens, I'm going to pick this guy to win. He's kind of turning into his own meme. You know, I kind of looked at Denis Tiuliulin as like a gritty old poor man's Nate Diaz, but he's actually slowly but surely becoming one of the losingest fighters in the UFC. So there's a narrative shift that Denis Tiuliulin, before, he's like that scrappy guy that grits it out, and now he's got one of the worst records in the UFC, and people are looking at him as like one of the worst fighters. I'm still picking Tiuliulin no matter who he fights next. I believe in Denis Tiuliulin. All right? Cedric Dumas, narrative shift. Horrible striking. He had some decent grappling, but he couldn't do anything with it. Not a big narrative shift with the grappling, but his striking is better. His striking looks improved. Some people want this guy to fight Bo Nickel. His jab looked really good. It's the first time Cedric Dumas' striking actually looked really good. A part of it was because Tiuliulin was just so slow, but also Tiuliulin, for the most part, is a striker. You know, I was saying that Tiuliulin, if this is a battle on the feet, I think he's going to win. Cedric Dumas shut that down. He looked fast. His jab, sweet piece special, looked real good. So the narrative shift on him was that his striking is actually getting better. So good for Cedric Dumas, but let's get on to the next one. Jai Herbert, Rolando Bedoya. Narrative shift here. Not a real narrative shift for Rolando Bedoya. I mean, he still has that patented shoot box style, always going to be aggressive, going to move forward, willing to go to war. But Jai Herbert, now we're thinking that we could get good, entertaining fights from Jai Herbert. Now we're not looking at Jai Herbert as a constant NPC type of fighter on the feet. Now Jai Herbert, we think, could go out there and give us a great fight. And so I'm not excited to see this guy fight from here on out. Like, I actually don't mind watching Jai Herbert fight. That's the narrative shift. He had a great fight. Usually he has some stinkers, slow fights, a bunch of pit-pat shots, but, you know, these guys went to war, and Jai Herbert stepped up big time. Part of that was the shoot box style that was in front of him, but at the same time, got to give credit where credit is due. So Jai Herbert has potential to be entertaining. All right, let's get on to the next one. There was no narrative shift here. Literally no narrative shift here. I think Dudakova was undefeated. She's no longer undefeated. But that's really it. You know, there wasn't a big narrative shift. Big narrative shift here. Jordan Vucenic, grappler. That's how we looked at him. Now he's actually a really solid striker, and he's looking like he could be an elite fighter. Now, to be fair, we say, oh, he's looking like he could be elite because he did really well against Guram on short notice. And honestly, imagine what if he had a full camp. He could have actually won that fight. But it's against Guram, who, in my opinion, although I'm really happy that Guram got the win, Guram has been very overrated throughout his UFC career. You know, it's to the point to where Guram basically had no wins in the UFC. He technically beat Mateusz Gamrot, but that was technically a robbery. So going into this fight, Guram was, you could say, 0-3. And people were talking about him like, on any given night, this guy could fight for the belt and win. You know what I mean? Like, he's always a couple fights away from the title. Like, I don't know where these guys got the narrative just because he's a flashy, well-rounded fighter. Like, he's obviously really technical. He's really skilled. He is very good. But, you know what? His striking didn't look that great. Like, of course, he's always got the really good Guram Kutateladze-style body shots where he's got the liver shot and whatnot. He's got flashy kicks and flying knees, but it's actually when he grapples and just tries to get top position and tries to beat people up on the ground or control people, that's actually usually where it's a safe bet for him to win a round. You know what I mean? So, listen, Jordan Vucenic, I mean, this is a long-winded way of me saying Jordan Vucenic is looking really good. Guram Kutateladze is not this elite test that some people think he might be. Like, this is not Jordan Vucenic beating a top 10 guy. It's Jordan Vucenic beating a solid unranked guy at lightweight that's really good. Well, he didn't even beat him. Hold on. This is how you know that Guram didn't even have a great performance. It's almost as if Jordan Vucenic won that shit. It was like a draw, basically. What am I saying? We're talking about this as if Jordan Vucenic won. He damn near did. The narrative shift on Jordan Vucenic is that he's really well-rounded, he's fast and dangerous on the feet, and imagine if this guy has a full training camp. He went from being a prospect, relatively unknown, to now he's on all of the hardcore fans' radar, and we're thinking about this guy as, with a few more years, this guy could be ranked. Or before then, a couple more fights, he could be ranked. He's the new Guram Kutateladze, basically. But he did really well, and Guram won, but again, you would want to see him create a bit of a bigger gap over a guy making his debut when he's getting the hype that he's getting. However, it was good to see Guram impose his will. I think that maybe we're going to start to see Guram impose his will and go for the grappling a little bit more often, because that's exactly what won him the second and the third round. So Guram went from a guy that doesn't impose his will to a guy that can impose his will. So that's a good narrative shift on Guram, but I think that another narrative shift is that he's not as elite as people originally hyped him up to be, but Jordan Vucenic is very good, and Guram still had a good win, so yeah. Shamil Gaziev versus Don'Tale Mayes. No real narrative shift on Don'Tale Mayes, other than he may have the worst, one of the worst gas tanks we've ever seen, but is that really surprising? The narrative shift for Shamil, to be honest, I think he went from a fun fighter that just gasses out, but at least he goes out there trying to finish the fight, and he had a couple of finishes. He finished Martin Buday. He got a finish on his Dana White Contender Series fight. He knocked people out before the UFC. To be honest, guys, Shamil Gaziev had the most boring fight of the entire night on UFC Abu Dhabi. So the narrative shift is that Shamil could be a really boring fighter. I mean, Don'Tale Mayes, listen, he's tricky on the feet. That was the thing. Don'Tale Mayes slugs himself forward and trudges forward and freaking slings leather, but I mean, he's not the highest level striker. And Shamil Gaziev was stinking it up against the fence, stinking it up on the ground. He was landing some good ground and pound shots or clinch strikes, but they were literally few and far in between. He had a boring performance. And Shamil Gaziev, he's one of my favorite fighters, but there's potential for Shamil Gaziev to give us really boring performances, okay, where he just kind of lays in praise and uses his weight to kind of just weigh on people. But I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but we looked at Shamil as having one of the worst gas tanks in the UFC. It's getting worse. Like, dude, he wasn't even working in the first round after he got the takedown. He was literally in half guard, just camping out. Don'Tale Mayes was doing nothing. And I kid you not, Shamil was gassing himself out in that position. I don't know how it's possible. Like, the fight with Jairzinho, that was kind of high-paced. Jairzinho was moving around, and Shamil's eyes have to dart whenever Jairzinho moves. His eyes are going to have to dart right. They're going to have to dart left. That's an intense process. But, you're just sitting in half guard on top of Don'Tale Mayes. How is that chipping away at your gas tank? Shamil looked more gassed than Mayes. Shamil would get gassed out when he was in lay-and-pray positions. His gas tank might even be worse than we thought. And, I mean, he looked to come in better shape, but I don't know if it's possible for him to have a good gas tank. Like, I really hope he could fix his gas tank, because I actually want to see Shamil, beat up. Like, it's crazy. Against Martin Buday, this guy actually freaking imposed his will and, beat the shit out of him. It was like Holloway Cater. It was like a heavyweight Holloway Cater when he fought Martin Buday. But, since then, it's gotten worse. I don't know how it's possible. It's literally gotten worse. I mean, we have to be honest. How is this possible? I don't understand. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. I guess Shamil just has to continue to work on his gas tank, because that really seems to be the only thing that's going to hold him back. If he fights Mick Parkin wins via just having a better gas tank. I honestly think Shamil has the heart, has the chin, the durability to just fucking, barge forward and mow people down. You know, even if this guy were to lose 10 pounds, or maybe he doesn't take as good of a shot, but he still has a granite chin no matter what, I think Shamil could be like a top 15 level guy, top 10 level guy. But the issue is when he fights someone that's just a little bit more technical, with better footwork, a little bit of a better gas tank than Dontel Bay is like Mick Park, and he's probably going to lose because he gasses out. Shamil has all the tools. He's got the power. He's got the heart. He's got the chin. It's just that the cardio, man. You got to work on the cardio. So his gas tank might even be worse than we originally thought. All right, let's get on to the next one. Narrative shift. Muhammad Yaya is worse than we thought. I mean, Fernandes made Trevor Peek's win over Muhammad Yaya look like it was a mid-win, which is very impressive. Trevor Peek couldn't finish Muhammad Yaya. Fernandes did in the first round and did so dominantly, was literally emoting on him. So this is a new prospect that we're going to be watching out for in the lightweight division. He went from being an unknown guy to now he's known. Now he's on our radar, and he's got finishing potential, and he's an entertaining striker. Muhammad Yaya, narrative shift is that he's just not that great. So yeah, he had a decision with Trevor Peek. He got destroyed in one round. So the narrative on him is that, you know, he's not that good, and he's getting worse. But this is another interesting one. Azamat Murzakanov, Alonzo Menafield. I don't think there was a real narrative shift with Alonzo Menafield. Azamat Murzakanov, narrative shift is that he's got a really entertaining style. I mean, I know he was entertaining before this fight. We all knew he was a good striker. He was explosive. There were probably some new fans that have never seen Azamat Murzakanov fight that are shocked to see this dude that looks like that sling leather and throw hands as fast as he was throwing hands and be as entertaining as he was. So there's a big narrative shift for a lot of people. They know Azamat Murzakanov is not just some like pitter-pat at range, blast double leg guy. He's an electric striker. But now he seems to be getting even more dominant. I mean, he looked good against Jacoby, but he completely destroyed Alonzo Menafield, who beat Jacoby. Jacoby did well against Alonzo Menafield, but Menafield kept dropping him. Azamat Murzakanov, the narrative shift here is that, yeah, this guy is 100% going to be ranked. He might be ranked, but he's 100% going to be in the top 10. And in my opinion, he could be a future top 5 guy. Don't know if he's going to fight for the belt, but I think he could be a top 5 guy. There's a lot of people in the top 10 that I think Azamat could beat. And he's always going to give us a good fight. So Azamat Murzakanov, you can count on him always being entertaining. Big narrative shift on this one. Elvis Brenner, not a big narrative shift. I guess we were talking about Elvis Brenner as maybe being a future top 15, top 10 guy. Maybe we pump the brakes a little bit right now, but he's still young. He still has time. But he's not going to get there that soon. For Joel Alvarez, though, as inactive as he's been, he went from being someone that's sort of like a blip on the radar. Maybe we hardly ever see this guy fight to now we're looking at him as maybe he's fighting Jalen Turner next. Maybe he's going to fight someone like Dan Hooker next, right? He'd be a fight that Paddy Pimblett could have. Joel Alvarez is looking like a really well-rounded, dangerous, and high fight IQ guy that could make a run in the rankings. And yeah, I mean, his shot selection was on point. We know defensive grappling. I mean, Elvis Brenner's got decent takedowns, and we've seen Joel Alvarez get destroyed on the ground against Umar-Sandhagen. His defensive grappling has improved. His striking has improved. And, yeah, he's looking like a serious threat in this division. So he went from a guy that got a lot of hype going into the Umar-Sandhagen fight to kind of falling off a little bit with his inactivity, and now he's back on our radar, and he's kind of having a big resurgence with a win over Elvis Brenner. And, you know, I talk about Odolbai, for example, Mytek Odolbai. He's, in my opinion, one of the best prospects in the UFC. Joel Alvarez had a much cleaner and better performance than Odolbai did, right? And Odolbai was mixing in the takedowns, and he was also doing well on the feet, but he didn't get a finish, and he wasn't making it look as clean. So this was a really good performance. The first time we've seen someone finish Elvis Brenner in the UFC. Very impressive because we know how tough Elvis Brenner is. So let's get on to the next one. Lupy Godinez. Honestly, I don't think there was a big narrative shift with Dern. A lot of people thought that Lupy Godinez won this fight. I think the narrative shift, if anything, was with Lupy Godinez, right? Because she was sort of the marauder, the Chandler of WMMA, the Michael Chandler of WMMA, and she kind of fought a little bit too reserved early on. And people that were watching the fight with me, my chat was saying, you know, what's going on with Lupy? She's not being that aggressive. Other than that, there's not really a big narrative shift there. Tony Ferguson, Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa still has an ability to get a win in the UFC, I guess. And Tony Ferguson is getting even worse. I mean, you think about the Michael Chandler KO. You think about all the losses where he's gotten totally out-grappled by Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira. You think about him getting subbed by Nate Diaz. Even in the fights where he's going to decision with like Paddy Pimblett or he's getting subbed in the 4th round against Diaz, like he's still putting up a decent fight. Here he just got completely ran through, blitzkrieged. It honestly looked like a novice was fighting a UFC fighter here. Yeah, there was a feel-out process for a minute. And, there wasn't a whole lot going on. But as soon as there was a grappling exchange, Tony Ferguson looked like he was 3 weight classes below in strength. And there was just no technique to put up a fight against Michael Chiesa. Tony Ferguson, at this point, might be the worst UFC fighter that there is, honestly. Like, with an ability to defend himself. Listen, against Pimblett, there was some competition on the feet, right? He dropped Bobby Green. He had a decent couple of winning rounds against Nate Diaz. Here, he looked like he could not defend himself in an area, the grappling, where we used to talk about Tony as being pretty good. And I know that the narrative on Tony's grappling has shifted a lot throughout the past couple of years, seeing him get out-grappled left and right and being weak on the ground. But, I mean, at least he wasn't getting finished by Pimblett. He got finished by Green, but here he just got cut through easily. And we rarely see Michael Chiesa do that. I mean, Michael Chiesa literally had the easiest submission of his entire career right there. And that's not even this isn't shocking at all. I mean, we know Tony Ferguson has been declined, but again, he is probably the worst welterweight, lightweight that there is in the UFC. I do not think there's a single winnable fight for him. And as far as his retirement, like, listen, Tony isn't going to retire. He put 1 glove down. It looked like DC and the UFC was trying to pressure him to retire. I know Dana wanted him to retire. Tony's never going to retire on his own accord. So there's no narrative shift there because I knew Tony didn't want to retire. He's never going to want to retire. But yeah, there's not really a big narrative shift other than, oh wait, Tony's literally gotten even worse than we thought possible. So yeah, very unfortunate, but it's not that sad. I don't even count these losses for Ferguson. At this point, he's a completely different version of himself. He should have retired a while ago. This loss, he didn't take a lot of damage, so I'm not sad because he didn't get his ass kicked. So even though he's not able to defend himself in the grappling, it's not like he took a lot of brain damage. And we expected him to lose anyway. But I expected him to lose by getting held on the ground for 3 rounds, getting squashed. I didn't expect him to lose like this. So yeah, this is it's not that sad, to be honest. I mean, it's the 8th loss in a row. It's to be expected, but this, it's more just like, yeah, he's completely cooked. He's overcooked at this point. So I hope Tony retires. I don't think he will on his own. But yeah, narrative shift, Deiveson Figueiredo, Marlon Vera. A lot of people are saying that Marlon Vera, they're saying, this is another example where Marlon Vera just isn't elite. And I think that's the biggest narrative shift amongst the majority of fans. Another example, Marlon Vera is not elite. He doesn't belong in the top 10. He's the biggest fraud in the top 10. I disagree with that narrative. That's a narrative that I disagree with, but it is a narrative. Marlon Vera, he does have some decent wins. He has wins over Rob Font, but he was getting pieced up and getting knockdowns when he needed them, but still a good win. He knocked out Dominic Cruz, and even though Cruz is a little bit older, it's not like Cruz is 40 years old, right? Cruz is still crafty, still pretty fast. He's got wins over Frankie, Davey Grant. He doesn't have the best wins, all right? He should have beat Song Yudong back in the day, but that was a very new Song Yudong to the UFC. Either way, yeah, it's clear that Marlon Vera is one of the worst top 10 guys in the bantamweight division. However, I do think that Marlon Vera belongs in the rankings. I cannot be the only one. Marlon Vera was winning the second round. He was outstriking Figueiredo, who looked like he was starting to gas out a little bit. Marlon Vera was coming on strong. He was landing the better shots. He was moving forward. If the knockdown doesn't happen in the 3rd round, all right, and credit to Deiveson Figueiredo for finding the right shot, knocking him down. It wasn't just power. He also just set up a really beautiful shot. But Marlon Vera was winning the round up until then, and he probably landed more than Figueiredo overall. he had a really close fight with Deiveson Figueiredo, who we know is elite, former champion. He's probably not in his prime. He's probably not the best he's ever been, even though I think I'm seeing a more, I'm seeing a wiser Figueiredo in the cage. He's less looking for just a big, powerful shot. Like, we're seeing him mix in the grappling, and we're seeing him throw a little bit more output. So I do think Figueiredo's fighting like a crafty vet these days, and he still has athleticism and power, which is great. He's still a good version of himself. We know Figueiredo's great. If Marlon Vera is having a very close fight with a former champion, former flyweight great, guy on a win streak, Deiveson Figueiredo, that deserves a number one contenders fight right now, he ain't just a total fraud. All right? Marlon Vera had a good performance despite losing. He had a good performance. He came up short. But let's not act like Marlon Vera is just getting toasted by everyone that he fights. Like, yeah, he got sunned by Sandhagen. Yeah, he got sunned by O'Malley, but that's basically it. No one else has really sunned Marlon Vera. Aldo beat him, but he had a pretty close fight with Aldo. This was not a moment where Marlon Vera just got made to look like a complete imbecile. This was not a moment where Marlon Vera is just another fraud. He should have never been in the top 10. Like, I saw a guy that pushed Deiveson Figueiredo, that started to gain momentum, that won the second round, that was winning the third, and then he got dropped, and then it was competitive. But I'm telling you, that was a decent performance from Marlon. And it was a close fight for Figueiredo. Figueiredo just won that by a hair with the knockdown. But either way, is there a narrative shift for so I disagree with the main narrative that Marlon Vera just doesn't belong in the top 15 or whatever. Like, he's a good fighter. He's not a top 5 guy. He's at the bottom of the barrel of the top 10, but I do believe he's a top 15 worthy fighter in this division. We saw him get dropped for the first time, so maybe there's a bit of a shift there. We view him now as a guy that can be dropped. He's taken enough damage throughout his career to where maybe that O'Malley fight was the straw that broke the camel's back. But for Deiveson Figueiredo, is there a big narrative shift? I don't know. I expected him to do a little bit better on the ground, but to be fair, we know Marlon Vera's takedown defense gets better as fights go on. His striking looked good. It looked pretty good. His chin, I will say this, and no one's really talking about this, but I remember Figueiredo getting hurt in the Moreno fights, and, Figueiredo was taking a lot of damage. He was having wars, and I was worried about how his chin was going to hold up at bantamweight. And he's definitely fighting a more careful style, because he's fighting guys that hit harder. But he can take a punch, man. Like, Chito Vera was hitting him with some big shots. He took a couple of big punches from Garbrandt, who we know hits hard. And I do think that Figueiredo, maybe bantamweight should have been his division back in the day. I mean, he's got good durability in this division. So I want to see him fight Peter Yan. That's the fight to make, number one contenders fight. We'll talk about Umar soon, whether or not he deserves a title shot, but let's get on to this one. Shara Magomedov, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Not a big narrative shift with Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, but in my opinion, there should be. Like, this guy is always going to give us entertaining fights. He dropped Kevin Holland. At one point, he dropped Shara Magomedov, even though it was sort of an off-balance knockdown. But the dude has really heavy hands. He pushes a pace. He gives us good scraps every single time. He's an entertaining fighter. He's a slugger. Not the most intricate, not the fanciest style, right? But Mikhail Oleksiejczuk just has the basics, and he brings people to war quite often. And I think that we can always bank on Mikhail Oleksiejczuk giving us a solid scrap. He's not going to be in boring fights, and he's always a tough test for, like, up-and-coming prospects to fight. So I think hardcore fans are starting to like Mikhail's style more. And then Shara Magomedov, I think the narrative shift here is that, even though he's winning his fights, he's underwhelmingly winning his fights. He is not living up to the expectations. And some people think that the majority of fans are being too harsh, that we have our expectations too high. But listen, this dude is the co-main event on an Abu Dhabi card. Like, he's on the poster in his third UFC fight. Of course the expectations are going to be high for Shara Magomedov, right? We're talking about Shara as, man, he's... After his UFC debut, I said, listen, he got taken down, but he kind of dominated the stand-up the whole time. But I just haven't since then seen... And yes, he got a knockout in his last fight, But even then, it was a little bit underwhelming until the knockout itself. Shara's got great output. He's got great technique. He doesn't have a lot of pop. I just do not see someone that is a top 5 striker, top 5 most dangerous guy in the stand-up. I do not see someone that is really, really difficult to beat. Like, Mikhail Alekseychuk is good. He's tough. But there's like 15, 20 people in this division that I think give Shara as tough of a fight, maybe a tougher fight than Mikhail Alekseychuk. There's like 20 people that are better than Mikhail Alekseychuk, right? I mean, we saw Michel Pereira run through Mikhail in like a minute. And I know styles make fights, but still, I think that the big narrative shift here is that Shara may not be this dominant striker like we thought. He's a good striker. He's a very fun striker to watch. He's technical, but he's not this guy that's going to be thrashing people, and he's not like a Khamzat Chimaev on the feet, okay? But he has time to get better. He's not looking like a future champion, okay? But it is what it is. Not everyone has to be a future champ. Either way, let's get on to the next one. Umar Nurmagomedov had the biggest narrative shift, but I want to talk about Corey Sandhagen first, okay? Sandhagen, a lot of people were saying it looked like Sandhagen dedicated 95% of his training camp to wrestling. So that means like he just completely dropped off with his striking training, I guess. That's what most people are saying. Obviously, a big part of his camp was to out-grapple Umar Nurmagomedov in moments, like defensively out-grapple him. His defensive grappling has improved, all right? That's what people are saying about Sandhagen. I agree with that narrative. His defensive grappling looked great. His takedown defense held up. The specifics training held up. Remember when Volkanovski was talking about doing specifics with Craig Jones going into the Islam Makhachev fight? And even Corey Sandhagen said that he had an inspiring performance, right? Sandhagen took a year off because of the tricep injury, and he was saying he saw Volkanovski's inspiring performance, and he saw a bunch of people's inspiring performances, O'Malley's inspiring performance. I thought we were going to get a truly inspiring performance from Sandhagen in that first round when he started stuffing the takedowns, getting up to his feet, and I was like, whoa, Sandhagen is about to pull off a Volkanovski style performance like Volk had against Islam, but he's probably winning. His striking has, in my opinion, regressed, okay? Now listen. Umar Nurmagomedov, we're going to get to Umar Nurmagomedov. Corey Sandhagen has been doing a lot of training with Trevor Whitman. I feel like, now this could be a casual take, all right? Trevor Whitman's always been the basics guy. He's been the footwork guy, the basics guy. Justin Gaethje's a wild man before he goes to him. Now Justin Gaethje's a lot more crisp on the feet, right? And he's worrying about footwork and defense first. He's like, dude, defense 100%. Don't even worry about offense. The offense will come. Kamaru Usman goes to Trevor Whitman, improves. His striking actually got a lot better, and now he has better footwork, better jab, nice basics. Sandhagen was an elite striker, right? He came into the UFC, he's an elite striker. Creative striker. Flying knees, spinning kicks. He's like creative. Adesanya's talking about how, man, Sandhagen's one of my favorite creative strikers. We're talking about this guy as a wizard on the feet. He goes to Trevor Whitman, and again, this is I'm just going to fucking, who cares, bro? You guys may disagree with this, but like, I don't know. I feel like his style got dumbed down, bro. I feel like Corey Sandhagen, like, we talk about him as like the beakers and test tubes guy. Like, Sandhagen thrives with his striking because he's a creative striker, man. He takes risks. Sandhagen's the guy that goes out there and hurts people in fights. He's not only a creative striker that throws flashy techniques, but he's trying to hurt people out there, right? He said after the TJ fight, TJ may have won, but his village is still burning. He was dropping TJ, bloodying him up, man. He had a clean check left hook. Corey Sandhagen was throwing flying knees and stinging him. And I know that Umar Nurmagomedov was way too fast for Sandhagen, and the speed was on another level. Sandhagen dumbed his style down on the feet way too much. And I know it's easier said than done to go out there and actually let your hands go. But from a guy like Sandhagen that's so in tune with the mental warfare and amping up the intensity and, you know, talking about wanting to have an inspiring performance, you would expect a vet like that to be like, you know what? Things are rough on the feet. I'm fucking biting down on the mouthpiece. I'm going to move forward If I get hit, I get hit. I'm going for the kill. Kill or be killed. And instead it was like feints, stance switches, pop the jab. Trevor Whitman popped the jab, right? Trevor Whitman. Dude, Trevor Whitman had Corey Sandhagen hitting the speed, not the speed bag, that bag. Trevor Whitman's got this freaking, dude, I sound like such a absolute casual right now. You know that fucking round bag in between two strings? That's that bag that he always has Gagey and Usman hitting, and they're constantly failing, and it's really difficult to hit. He had Corey Sandhagen focusing too much on that. All the little details that, dude, Sandhagen's already a sick striker. All right? He had Sandhagen doing a little, dude, Trevor Whitman's the type of coach, and I know I've never been trained by Trevor Whitman, but Trevor Whitman's the type of coach to take like a world-class striker and have him do like day one basic novice training because like, hey man, you're never too good to do the basics. And he freaking confuses you by overly analyzing and overly critiquing all the little basics. And then instead of Corey Sandhagen thinking about like, man, how are we going to set this up or this up? Corey Sandhagen's thinking about, wait, my foot was out of place half a centimeter. Man, he was focusing too much on the outside foot battle in the striking. And I think Sandhagen, he became too nerdy for himself, man. I'm going to be honest, Sandhagen, he fought like a bit of a nerd. Okay? Like, yeah, he was freaking parrying the lead hand of Umar. Yeah, he was switching stances on him. But he was getting pieced up. And the thing is, Umar, we're going to talk about this. Like, listen. Sandhagen's grappling looked great. His strength, because we talked about Sandhagen, he's kind of scrawny. He looked strong. He looked dense. The striking, like flimsy teep kicks and leg kicks and popping the jab and just spamming the lead hook, that was basically it. There was no aggression. There was no imposing of the will on the feet. There was no pressing the pace and biting down on the mouthpiece and like trying new things. And again, it's a lot easier said than done. But I'm just saying, I think that Corey Sandhagen has regressed in his striking, in my opinion. I think that the Aljamain Sterling fight where he got choked out, obviously that was a wake-up call that he's got to work on his defensive grappling. Then we had the flying knee against Edgar. We had the spinning wheel kick against Marlon Moraes. We had the war with TJ Dillashaw, where Sandhagen's going to war with TJ. And TJ's wrestling against him, and his wrestling has improved since then. But on the feet, Sandhagen was looking like he had some snap to his punches, and he was looking creative, throwing flying knees and whatnot. But I remember watching the Song Yadong fight, because he fought Petr Yan right after that. And in that fight, we were talking about, whoa, what a striker's treat. The first round, Sandhagen's like piecing up Yan with the long, wiry strikes, and we're like, whoa, this was a striker's treat, right? What an amazing matchup to watch. One of the most fun, highly technical striking battles ever. And, of course, he's improving his grappling. Then he fights Song Yadong. And I remember watching that fight, and I think I promise I was coping. Okay, I was coping during and after the fight. Where, yes, Song Yadong is super fast and all that, but, like, I was thinking during the fight, man, Sandhagen, like, his kicks look great, body kicks and all that, but I'm not seeing the same boxing that I saw in the TJ or the Yan fight. Sandhagen looks a little underwhelming. And I was trying to say, yeah, maybe that's just because Song Yadong's real tough. And it is true. Song Yadong's a very tough matchup. But I wasn't thinking about Sandhagen regressing. I think I was coping a little bit. I'm like, it's probably just the stylistic matchup. Song Yadong's a stylistic nightmare in this regard. But there was something up. There was something like, oh, maybe striking's regressing a little bit. Looks a little bit slower, right? Not as dynamic, but still won. But it was very close. The next fight he has with Chito Vera. And again, the grappling looked great. The striking looked pretty good. But again, even though it was clear on the feet, and it's probably easier to outstrike Chito, there's still like, wait a second. This ain't the same aggressive, like creative striker. He's not really creating the same gap. And then, of course, we saw the Rob Font fight where he tore his tricep, and I think his striking has regressed, honestly. I think it's regressed with his approach. I think the creativity wasn't there, and I think his dynamicism, I think his speed, I think the snap on his punches, I don't think he's as good on the feet as he used to be. So I know I just talked about Sandhagen a lot, but the main point that I'm trying to make is that Sandhagen's approach and in general his striking, like his speed, his creativity, I've noticed that throughout the past couple of years, it's regressed a little bit, and it's evident. So the reason why, listen, people are going to say that I'm just coping, and people are going to say that, dude, no, he was the best he's ever been, bro. He was the best he's ever been. The creativity was there. It's just Umar shut him down. Like, dude, Sandhagen was throwing like 10 fucking strikes around. And his jab looked lazy. It was like a lazy jab, right? That's not the same jab that Sandhagen was freaking throwing out there against Peter Yan, all right? His lead hook, that wasn't the same lead hook he was throwing against TJ Dillashaw. It looked slow. His boxing is like a complete shadow of what it used to be. And, I think that his grappling has gotten a lot better, but I think his striking has regressed a little bit. So, and he just wasn't throwing. There were like minutes, like whole minutes where Umar was just in front of him, jab, right? Front kick to the face, like grazes his face. And then like a takedown attempt. And then Umar would throw a body kick and he would land it. And he would throw another jab and Sandhagen wouldn't throw anything. And then Sandhagen would throw a jab and Umar would just snap back with 1, 2, 3, landing the second and the third punch. And Umar's just out there mogging him with speed and just imposing his will. And that was the big difference. Nurmagomedov, the grappling, I think that there's a narrative shift that maybe he's not, all right, maybe he's not the Khabib guy, but whatever. Not in my opinion. There may be a little bit of a narrative shift. To be honest, I haven't seen it. But I could see some people saying, oh, his grappling's overrated. But I actually think Corey Sandhagen just leveled up a lot with his defensive grappling. I still think Umar Nurmagomedov in the grappling is a problem. Big narrative shift for Umar is that we now think of this dude as, yeah, he's top 5. Like, before this fight, hadn't beat anyone worth a damn, basically. I mean, the people that he was beating weren't the worst fighters in the UFC, in the bantamweight division, but not even close to being ranked worthy. Now he gets past Corey Sandhagen, who, although his striking, in my opinion, has progressed a little bit. Sandhagen's still elite, all right? He can still go out there and outstrike plenty of guys in the bantamweight division, plenty of solid strikers. And now we know that Sandhagen can wrestle, like, real well. We know Umar Nurmagomedov is fighting for the title in the future. There was a question, is he going to get fraud checked? Is he ready for the top 5? He's ready for the top 5. Now we know that. Other narrative shift is, I think this, for me, is a bit of a shift, and for a lot of other people too. We knew Umar was a good striker. We knew he was a dynamic striker, but I didn't think he'd be able to put it together this well, make it look this clean, and against a high-level guy like Sandhagen, who, even though he's looking a little bit slower, Sandhagen still is really good with his footwork. He still is good at keeping range. He's a smart fighter. He's got a high fight IQ. It was pretty impressive to see Umar, who got dropped in his last fight, against a guy that just freaking darted in and threw a big bomb, right, and just knocked him down. It wasn't like you set it up with perfect timing or anything. They just fucking cracked him with a big overhand. Threw it over the top like a sack of potatoes. And to see Umar, who basically got flash knocked out there and got the takedown, who looked green on the feet, and for the rest of the fight, he didn't want no part of the striking. To see him go from that to comfortably outstriking Sandhagen easily was incredibly impressive, okay? So now a lot of us are looking at Umar as, with the threat of the takedown, he's a monster, because even if he struggles with the grappling, this guy is super fast. He's super dynamic. And you know what? It wasn't even the kicks that was doing the most for him last night. It was actually just the boxing. Like, he was landing plenty of three-piece combinations. Good jab as well. Very fast. His in and out movement is excellent, right? He's landing on Sandhagen and then he's out of range and he can keep distance really well. So Umar Nurmagomedov, like, his boxing looks real good too. Like, I'm not saying he's got like Peter Yan style boxing, but I mean, he was landing and his hands are fast and he was landing in combinations at times and he was in and out, right? His distance management was great. So Umar Nurmagomedov, because of how well-rounded he is, and he's a threat on the feet, he's a threat on the ground, people are saying it like a mini Makhachev. Different style of striking, but I understand why, because it's like, dude, if Makhachev misses a takedown attempt, like, he's going to be able to handle his own on the feet. Umar Nurmagomedov's going to be able to handle his own on the feet against, in my opinion, like, damn near everyone in this division outside of a couple of fighters. Like, I think Peter Yan would be able to figure him out on the feet. But then again, it's like, all right, well, now Umar can shoot takedowns. And it's not like he's going to get blown out of the water on the feet, right? Against O'Malley, he's shooting takedowns and he's fast on the feet. I do think O'Malley would have a decent chance to knock him out. But that's just because O'Malley, in my opinion, is probably, like, by far the best striker in this division next to Yan. But outside of O'Malley and Yan, I could see Umar Nurmagomedov outstriking everyone in this division right now, which goes to show that he is elite on the feet, faster than I thought, more comfortable on the feet than I thought. There's also a narrative where a lot of people are saying that he's boring as fuck. Umar's got a boring style. I don't understand it. You know, people were saying this after the Dustin Poirier fight. Dude, he's so boring. Why do you have to win? Like, Islam Makhachev gave us a great fight. And I know that every once in a while someone shoots a takedown, all of a sudden they're boring and you're going to describe them as boring. But, like, I think it's entertaining to have a high-paced fight no matter what's happening. If the fight is high-paced and there's lots of action, of course, striking is always more entertaining than grappling. But if you've got a guy like Islam Makhachev or Umar Nurmagomedov that's shooting 3 takedowns around, they don't always get them, and guess what? They're willing to stand. They're willing to strike. Yeah, Umar's not moving forward like Yuri Prohaska. He's not a wild man on the feet taking all the risk, but he's giving us output. He's landing clean shots. He's a dynamic striker. He's, like, landing shots on Corey Sandhagen, who's an elite striker, and, like, just fucking him up, right? Just, like, jabbing him effortlessly. Corey's not doing a whole lot. Again, he was caught up with the beakers and test tubes, but still, like, consistently punching Corey Sandhagen in the face clean. I don't think that's boring, right? Yes, it wasn't the best fight. Yes, part of why it wasn't the best fight was because Corey Sandhagen wasn't doing a whole lot. Sandhagen's still good at keeping distance, and Umar's landing on him, but I actually think, if anything, listen, I didn't think this fight was that boring. It obviously wasn't fireworks, but that's on Corey, man. Umar Nurmagomedov, he's striking, he's throwing. He's moving forward, he's throwing combinations, he's committing to strikes. There's no commitment from Sandhagen. Sandhagen's the guy that we talk about as being a savage. We didn't see that, okay? So, if this fight was boring, it was not Umar Nurmagomedov. The grappling exchanges weren't boring because Umar barely could get any success. But when he would have it, he would have the back for like 30 seconds, or Corey Sandhagen would Granby roll out of it. And I even thought that was entertaining. But I don't think he's a boring fighter. Umar's not Yuri Prohaska, okay? He's not a KO artist that goes in there and KOs people with spinning elbows every time. But he's got high output on the feet. When he takes people down, he beats them up. He's a very high-paced fighter. I don't think high-paced fighters that commit to strikes and throw high output are boring fighters, all right? So, yeah, but people are talking about Umar as if, like, I'm seeing some of these comment sections, some of these comments, they'll have like 500 likes on Instagram, and people will be like, dude, he's so fucking boring. Like, he's not that boring, man. I don't understand it, right? Listen, I was rooting for Sandhagen. I wanted Sandhagen to win. I wish Sandhagen won. I wish Sandhagen were to have gotten a flying knee KO. But, I mean, I think that a boring fighter is someone that lays in praise. A boring fighter is someone that throws like pitter-pat shots at range and never commits to strikes, right? And it's hard to be boring when you're in front of a Corey Sandhagen who is respected, who we know is elite, and you're beating him in a way that we never thought was possible for this fight. So, yeah. I disagree with the narrative that he's a boring fighter. From what I've seen so far, he's had pretty entertaining fights. Not the most entertaining fighter, obviously. There are more entertaining fighters than Umar Nurmagomedov at bantamweight. But he's not the most boring, all right? He's, in my opinion, somewhat entertaining because I think it's really entertaining to see the highest level skill, the most well-rounded fighters. Of course, I'm always going to prefer a striker that goes out there and tries to KO people on the feet and has high output. But Umar Nurmagomedov has high output. He's not always going to KO people on the feet. Yeah, he shoots takedowns sometimes, but he's elite. He's good everywhere, and I just want to see the best fighters with high output, of course. All right? As long as you have high output and you're pushing a pace, then I don't think you could be that boring. Okay? Should Umar Nurmagomedov get a title fight? And what should Corey Sandhagen do next? Well, I'm really upset at what they did with Aldo, giving Aldo Mario Batista, which just makes no sense. Why would you give Aldo someone that is another under-the-radar fighter where he just fought an under-the-radar fighter in Jonathan Martinez? I don't understand what's different about Mario Batista. I know he's a decent fighter, but basically the same sort of fighter in terms of where he's at in his career and how much hype he has and what he's done as Mario Batista. Why is Aldo having to fight Mario Batista? It'll be exciting because I think Aldo will beat him up and have a good performance, but I think they should have waited a little bit to get Jose Aldo in there. Maybe they should have made Jose Aldo versus Henry Cejudo. But I'd like to see maybe Corey Sandhagen fight the winner of Batista and Jose Aldo, or just fight Henry Cejudo. That would be a good matchup. Should Umar Nurmagomedov get a title shot? Well, if you beat Corey Sandhagen, there's a great argument. But listen, there's also an argument that he doesn't. And I think that it's not the worst argument. I think it's a decent argument that he doesn't deserve it either. The more you think about it, yes, beating Corey Sandhagen means you're elite. But it is a little bit rushed. It's a little bit weird where it's like just a couple months ago, you're fighting Beksat Almakhan, right? You're fighting Nate Maness. You're fighting Raoni Barcelos. You fight Beksat Almakhan. And that's just a couple months ago where you fight Beksat Almakhan. You get one more win, and now you're in there with Sean O'Malley. And I know Sean O'Malley fought Peter Yan after fighting Pedro Munoz, and then he got a title shot. But, like, the Pedro Munoz fight was there, right? He fought Pedro Munoz. And guess what? Who he fought before Pedro Munoz? He fought, I forget his name, Paiva. He fought Paiva, and Paiva got himself a ranked win. He shouldn't have won the fight, but I believe Paiva beat Kyler Phillips. So Paiva was literally ranked when Sean O'Malley beat him. And then he fought Pedro Munoz. So we had a build-up to see a Pedro Munoz fight. And Pedro Munoz, the guy that knocked out Garbrandt, he fought Frankie and all that stuff. Like, Pedro was a crafty vet. He had been in the rankings. Yeah, it wasn't a good fight, so it's hardly like it even happened. But that fight happened. It was booked. Then he fought Petr Yan. And then he beat Petr Yan. And then he got the title fight. But Umar is going from Beksat to Corey title fight, where I just think, like, Figgy's a former champ. He's on a 3-fight win streak. I understand he's not got as big of a name because he's under the radar. And Petr Yan's always there. But I also understand it a little bit because, listen, Petr Yan's already fought for the belt. Like, he's a former champion. We've seen the O'Malley fight, although I'd like to see it again. And Figueiredo just isn't a big name. Umar's not a huge name, but he's a bigger name than Figueiredo right now because of the last name, because of the win over Corey Sandhagen. It's a big win, main event in Abu Dhabi. Like, a lot of eyes were on him in this fight. So I understand why the UFC would want Umar to fight for the belt next. O'Malley and Nurmagomedov would be similar to Conor and Khabib. It's like a Walmart bantamweight version of it. But I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't just like, dude, in the blink of an eye, Umar Nurmagomedov's getting a title fight. And even though he had to get past Corey Sandhagen, who is an elite fighter, who is a tough test, I don't know. It's all just out of nowhere, right? It's all just out of nowhere. A lot of other fighters have way, way tougher routes to the belt. And I don't want everyone to have the toughest route to the belt. For example, Alex Pereira, he didn't have the toughest route to the belt, but that's because he had this long history with Adesanya, right? So he had to fight Strickland, and that was kind of like his Corey Sandhagen fight. But Sandhagen at the time had a better resume than Strickland. So it's happened before. I didn't mind it when it was Pereira, but I think that there is a reason why people don't want Umar to get a title shot, because it, in my opinion as well, it feels like it's just, whoa, this is happening way too fast. It's way too easy. But a part of that is also because he made it look so easy. He made the win look so easy. It was almost anticlimactic because it wasn't this like Volkanovski and Makhachev fight that a lot of us expected, like this back and forth brawl, but also chess match. It was just like Umar just cruising to an easy win in the striking and kind of just sunned Sandhagen. And then like the next day, this guy's fighting for the belt. That's how it feels. So it's just a lot to process, man. It's a tough pill to swallow for Sandhagen fans. And Umar, it feels like out of nowhere, just went from unranked to now this dude is a title challenger, which is just the weird part. But if he fights for the belt, I don't mind it that much. But I also wouldn't mind Umar fighting in a number one contenders fight, okay? I also wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind him fighting Peter Yan. I wouldn't mind him fighting Figueiredo, because Figueiredo's on a crazy win streak. So, yeah. But if they give him the title shot, it is what it is. Like, I've seen people get a title shot off of beating a number one contender. Corey Sandhagen was the rightful number one contender. And, I mean, let's think about another division. Who's like a really highly ranked number one contender? Let's say someone, I don't know, that has like 4 wins in the UFC, gets a fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov and schools him, or like kind of easily beats him. Then I don't think we'd be complaining that much. So I don't mind it that much, but it still does feel a little weird to give him a title shot like this. But also it's just because it just was weird to see him beat Corey Sandhagen like this. So Umar overnight is like one of the best fighters in the bantamweight division overnight, which is the crazy part. Because we very rarely see people take this sort of bump up in competition and win, let alone win so effortlessly, right? Without going to war. Usually they go to war or they lose. He won, which is rare, and he won pretty easily. So we're just usually not in this situation, which is kind of crazy. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I'd like to see Umar fight Figueiredo. I think that's ideal. In an ideal world, that's where we would get like, okay, whoever wins that fight truly deserves to fight for the belt next. And I think Umar would beat Figueiredo. But then, of course, we have Petr Yan waiting in the wings. I wouldn't mind seeing Yan versus Cheeto. I kind of just want to see Yan get a win as well. But I don't mind that much if Umar fights for the belt next. All right? And if Merab wins against O'Malley, I'll say this. If Merab wins against O'Malley, then I would really want to see Umar fight for the belt, because I think that he'd be a much tougher fight for Merab than anyone else. And that seems to me like one of the most exciting matchups you could make. It's funny, like people would say, Merab's boring, Umar's boring, but we know that sometimes when you get 2 wrestlers, because that's why people would call them boring, when you get 2 wrestlers in the cage, they usually strike, they usually slug. People were saying Usman and Colby was going to be a snooze fest because they were both decision merchants going into that first fight, and they gave us one of the best fights ever. I think Umar Nurmagomedov and Merab would be a sick fight. I think that'd be an epic fight. Lots of striking, lots of sick grappling exchanges. And how crazy would it be to see Merab beat O'Malley and Umar have to fight Merab, and Merab just tosses Umar around 3rd, 4th, and 5th round? If Merab beats O'Malley, I would probably pick him to beat anyone else. There's a world where Merab could like ragdoll a Nurmagomedov in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th just based on having alien-like cardio, which is just crazy. So we'll see how scary Merab truly is if he can get past O'Malley, because that's a tough test. I think O'Malley's going to win. Nurmagomedov versus O'Malley would be a fun fight. I think it'd be a really good build-up because Nurmagomedov does not like O'Malley. So listen, if he fights for the belt, I think no matter who he fights, O'Malley and Merab would actually be really fun. So the more I think about it, the more fine I am with it. But I also don't mind seeing him fight Figueiredo. Either way, if he doesn't fight Figueiredo when he fights for the belt next, then I would love to see Figueiredo versus Yan, number one contenders fight. Yep. Umar Nurmagomedov on our radar overnight. Insane performance. Speed was there, and the thing that impressed me the most is that he was just very composed on the feet, and with the basics, like the boxing, Not even the front kicks and the lead question mark kicks, which he does have and he did show, won him most of the exchanges. It was just the boxing. You know, crisp, basic boxing, way faster hands than Sandhagen, and he wins. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I thought it was a really good card. Until next time.